Welcome to Sleepscape. If you enjoyed this, you can like the video and subscribe for more. If there's a story that you'd like for me to tell, feel free to leave a comment. It helps more than you know. Now, let's get into it. In the winter of the early 1980s, Janet Smurl was alone in the basement of her family's duplex on Chase Street in West Pittston when she heard someone softly call her name.
Janet.
At first, she ignored it. The washing machine had already begun its cycle, filling the basement with that low mechanical rhythm that old houses seem to absorb into their walls. Upstairs, the television played faintly somewhere in the distance. The rest of the home was empty. Her husband Jack was at work. The children were at school. The house should have been silent. Then the voice came again.
Janet.
This time it was clearer, closer. Janet slowly turned away from the washing machine and stared into the unfinished darkness of the basement. Cardboard boxes sat stacked against the concrete walls. Christmas decorations rested beneath dusty shelves. Weak daylight filtered through the small basement window near the ceiling, illuminating only pieces of the room while leaving the corners swallowed in shadow. There was nobody there. Janet later claimed the voice did not sound distorted or monstrous. If anything, that was what frightened her most. It sounded ordinary. Human. Like someone casually trying to get her attention from another room. She searched the basement anyway. Nothing. Then, just as she reached the staircase, the voice called her name again.
Janet.
This time directly behind her. According to Janet, something about the tone had changed. The voice no longer sounded curious. Now it sounded amused, almost playful. As though whatever was speaking understood she was afraid. Janet later claimed she shouted back into the basement in terror.
What do you want?
The voice never answered. It only whispered her name again.
Janet.
Years later, the Smurl family would say this moment marked a turning point inside the house on Chase Street. Because until then, strange things had happened around the property, but after the voices began, the family no longer believed they were dealing with random noises. They believed something inside the house was listening to them, learning them. And according to the Smurls, over time, the thing inside the home became disturbingly good at sounding human. The Smurl Haunting would eventually become one of the most infamous paranormal cases in American history. The case attracted national media attention throughout the 1980s. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren became heavily involved. Priests reportedly blessed the property multiple times. Skeptics accused the family of exaggeration and mass hysteria. Television crews crowded the street outside the home while reporters documented nearly every new claim emerging from the duplex. But before any of that happened, the Smurls were simply a working-class Pennsylvania family trying to recover from disaster. In 1972, Hurricane Agnes devastated parts of northeastern Pennsylvania. Entire neighborhoods flooded beneath rising water, including the home shared by Jack Smurl's parents, John and Mary Smurl. The family suddenly found themselves displaced. Eventually, John and Mary purchased a duplex on Chase Street in West Pittston. Jack and Janet moved into one side with their children while John and Mary occupied the other. The duplex was old, repairs were constant. The home creaked in the winter and groaned during storms. Like many homes throughout the region, it sat above old mining tunnels that had long since flooded and collapsed beneath the earth. People in West Pittston were used to strange sounds, settling foundations, shifting pipes, banging walls. Everything had an explanation, at least at first. According to the family, the strange activity began gradually after they moved into the duplex during the early 1970s. A dark stain repeatedly appeared on a carpet no matter how many times it was cleaned. Freshly repaired pipes burst unexpectedly. Tools vanished during renovations and later reappeared in impossible places. Then came electrical problems. One evening, Jack reportedly watched his television burst into flames without warning. Other appliances overheated or smoked for no clear reason. Still, none of it felt supernatural. Frustrating maybe, unsettling at times, but explainable. The disturbing incidents began with the children. The Smurl's oldest daughter began waking up terrified during the night. She claimed people were standing inside her bedroom watching her while she slept. Jack repeatedly searched the room and found nothing, but according to the family, the fear in the house slowly deepened over the years. Footsteps echoed upstairs while everyone sat downstairs together. Banging sounds came from inside the walls late at night. Toilets flushed by themselves. Radios turned on unexpectedly at full volume. And eventually, the voices began. According to the Smurl daughters, some of the most disturbing experiences in the house involved hearing family members calling them from isolated parts of the duplex late at night. As the years passed, the Smurl children reportedly became increasingly afraid of certain parts of the duplex, particularly at night. The upstairs hallway, the basement stairs, the rooms furthest away from everyone else. According to the family, the girls began hearing voices calling to them from inside the house after dark. Sometimes the voices sounded exactly like Janet. Soft, patient, calm.
Hey, come here for a second.
Other times the voice sounded like one of their sisters calling from another room. Occasionally, they claimed it sounded like Jack. The voices reportedly always came from somewhere isolated. An empty bedroom, the basement, the far end of the hallway where the lights didn't fully reach. And according to the Smurl daughters, the voices never shouted. They never sounded angry. If anything, they sounded unusually gentle. That was what frightened the family later, because the children often initially believed the voices were real. One of the girls later claimed she heard her mother calling softly from upstairs late one evening.
Can you come here for a minute?
The voice sounded completely normal. The child reportedly began walking toward the hallway before suddenly realizing her mother was downstairs in the kitchen the entire time. Another account described one of the daughters hearing her sister whisper her name repeatedly from inside an empty bedroom. According to the family, when she approached the doorway, the room was dark, silent, empty. The whispering stopped immediately. Janet later claimed the experiences deeply disturbed the children because the voices never sounded threatening enough to ignore. They sounded trustworthy, familiar, like someone they loved wanted their attention. Over time, the family reportedly became convinced that whatever was inside the house understood the routines of the children. It knew their names, it knew their voices, and according to the Smurls, it knew how to imitate both. The Smurl family would later become convinced that whatever was inside the house was deliberately attempting to lure the children into isolated parts of the home away from others. That detail deeply unsettled Janet and Jack, because if the voices had sounded monstrous, the children might have ignored them, but they didn't. They sounded safe. Over time, according to the family, the entity inside the house began imitating more than voices. It began imitating the family itself. Jack's mother, Mary Smurl, later claimed she repeatedly overheard violent arguments coming through the walls separating the two halves of the duplex. She heard Jack screaming at Janet, furniture moving, profanity. At times, the arguments sounded so intense that Mary feared someone inside the home might be hurt. But whenever she confronted them afterward, Janet and Jack appeared calm. No argument had taken place. Nothing inside the home appeared disturbed. According to the family, this happened multiple times. The Smurls later became convinced the entity was mimicking their voices in order to create fear and tension between family members, almost as though it enjoyed turning them against one another. Then there was the dog. The family owned a German Shepherd named Simon. On several occasions, Jack and Janet reportedly heard Simon howling somewhere else in the house late at night. Not barking or growling, but howling in distress. The kind of sound that immediately forces someone to awake in panic. But according to the family, whenever they rushed to investigate, they found Simon asleep beside their bed, undisturbed and silent. By the mid-1980s, the Smurls claimed the activity inside the duplex had escalated dramatically. Janet later reported seeing a black humanoid figure standing inside the kitchen during broad daylight. She described it as human-shaped but made from shifting darkness. Not solid, not transparent, something in between. The figure reportedly moved silently through the room before vanishing. Strangely, Mary Smurl later claimed she had seen a similar black figure independently on the opposite side of the duplex. The descriptions closely matched: a tall, dark shape moving silently through the home, watching, appearing briefly, then disappearing. Around this same time, the family reported a foul odor repeatedly appearing throughout the house. Rotting sewage, decay. The smell often appeared suddenly and vanished just as quickly. Skeptics would later argue the odor may have been connected to sewer problems in the area, but according to the Smurls, the smell often accompanied other activity inside the house. Knocking, voices, apparitions, as though the odor itself announced the presence of something nearby. One of the most publicized incidents reportedly occurred in 1985. Janet and her daughter were inside the kitchen when a heavy ceiling light fixture suddenly tore free and crashed onto the table beneath them without warning. The family later claimed the damage appeared unnatural, almost as though the fixture had been violently ripped downward. Fortunately, nobody was seriously injured. But according to the Smurls, fear inside the duplex was becoming constant. The family reportedly slept poorly. The children became increasingly afraid of certain rooms. And according to Jack and Janet, the house itself no longer felt random. It felt aware. The voices reportedly appeared most often when someone was isolated. In the basement, in the bathroom, inside bedrooms late at night. Janet later claimed the voice in the basement incident never answered direct questions. It only repeated her name, again and again, as though the goal was not communication, but recognition, as though something inside the house wanted acknowledgement, wanted someone to answer back. By 1986, the Smurl family contacted paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were already nationally famous due to their involvement in other haunting cases, including the Amityville investigation. According to the Warrens, the Smurl duplex contained multiple spirits as well as an inhuman demonic presence feeding on fear inside the home. The Warrens later claimed to have gathered disturbing audio recordings from inside the duplex, including whispering voices, knocking sound, and unexplained disturbances. Ed Warren specifically argued that the entity inside the house used mimicry and psychological manipulation to terrorize the family. Critics strongly disputed these claims. Skeptics, including investigators and psychologists, later argued the events could potentially be explained through stress, suggestion, neurological issues, environmental factors, or outright fabrication. Some critics also argued the Warrens themselves may have intensified the family's interpretation of ordinary events by framing them as demonic attacks. But regardless of the explanation, the fear inside the house became very real for the Smurls. The case soon attracted national media attention. Reporters crowded outside the duplex. Neighbors claimed to hear screaming coming from the property at night. Some allegedly reported hearing disturbances even when the family was away from the home entirely. One particularly disturbing account involved a neighbor reportedly calling the Smurl residence while the family was out of town. According to the story, a young girl answered the phone, laughing softly before abruptly disconnecting the call. No child was supposed to be inside the house. As media attention intensified, the Smurls claimed the activity worsened. Voices, banging, apparitions, whispers from empty rooms. The children continued reporting hearing family members calling to them from isolated parts of the house late at night. And according to the Smurls, the voices always sounded convincing. That was what terrified them the most in the end. Not the shadows, not the smells, not even the apparitions. It was the feeling that something inside the house understood exactly how human beings sounded, exactly how trust worked, exactly how to make someone follow a familiar voice into the dark. Over time, priests blessed the home multiple times. Religious groups gathered there to pray. Eventually, the Smurl family moved away from the duplex entirely. Later residents reportedly claimed they experienced nothing unusual inside the property. And to this day, the Smurl haunting remains deeply controversial. Some believe the family genuinely experienced something terrifying inside the Chase Street duplex. Others believe fear, stress, suggestion, religious belief, environmental conditions, and media pressure created a powerful form of shared psychological reinforcement within the household. But whether the events were supernatural or not, one detail from the case continues to deeply disturb people decades later. According to the Smurl children, the voices never sounded threatening. They sounded familiar. And sometimes, the children almost followed them.